And let's bring in our panel and take a look at all of this. And this Republican consultant, Marcus DelArtino, and Democratic consultant, Matt Grodsky. Thank you guys for joining us here today. What's going on here? We've seen, these name changes there on the federal level. We're seeing it now here in the state level. Wendy Rogers is now her second attempt to try to rename the Donald Trump Highway. Apparently she doesn't know or wasn't aware that it's not that easy to do in Arizona. We learned this a few years back when we renamed Piestewa Peak, didn't we?
We did. Yeah, that was a fun one. Do you remember that? So we had a renaming of Piestewa Peak, but the process that went through had some political landmines involved in it, is the nicest way I can put it. And so we've redone the way that we actually name these. And then that came up again on the naming of a mountain in the West Valley more recently, a couple years ago, for a fallen Navy SEAL that came from Arizona. And so the process is quite a bit different today than I think people remember it prior to that point.
And talk to me a little bit about the symbolism here. I mean, obviously that part of the state, if you look at the election results, that's a part of the state that is ruby red. I mean, if you go through that area, you're going to find a lot of Trump supporters. In fact, I think the Trump store is actually on State Route 260, so you can go buy all your Trump gear there. But talk to me a little bit the significance of the symbolism.
Sure. Symbolism, maybe the highway will come with a bootlicking overpass, right? I mean, I just think that at the end of the day, it is purely just to suck up to the president. They're trying to score political points, and I think those folks in opposition to it need to stress that, by and large, this is not what voters send people to the legislature to do. They're worried about real issues, and having this fight is just one of the many reasons people don't like politicians in the ledge.
Yeah, and it does kind of point to there is a lot of support. I've never seen this kind of influence from a president on the local level. I just spoke with T.J. and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the immigration bills in the next segment. But it seems like the Republicans here really are taking the lead in trying to further the agenda of Donald Trump here on the state level. Is that correct?
I think that's fair to say. I just remind everybody, I mean, this isn't anything new. We name things after presidents all the time. If you look at the dams in Arizona,
yeah, but usually those presidents aren't alive, Marcus. Right. Let's be honest here. Maybe not. I don't know when we named Roosevelt Dam, so, but you're most likely right. But I don't think there's anything particularly new happening here. But to your question, to your point, are they taking sort of a cue from that messaging? Well, of course they are, and it's happening in every other red state in America. He won decisively. They know that, and they're picking up on that messaging. Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, what can Democrats do on a messaging level when you're starting to see stuff like this happen?
Let's just talk about the absurdity of it. I mean, we were just chatting about it 10 seconds ago. If the president is alive, he's currently in office, you don't generally do things like that until after they've left office, right? So I think that folks, by and large, swing voters can see that there's some heavy level catering going on to the president, and it's just a matter of time before voters get tired of it and actually want them to solve real problems. So that's how I would message it.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here and let's and continue the conversation here on the other side. And when we come back after the break, we're going to look at the rest of this week's major headlines. Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. This time of year, lawmakers are buried under bills to consider. So which ones actually have a chance to make it to the governor's desk? Let's bring our panel back in. Marcus DelArtino, Matt Grodsky. Thanks for sticking around here today. Let's start, though, I mean, with a bill we just kind of discussed with TJ's show. Let's talk a little bit about legislative immunity. That's a big issue these days. It passed out of the House committee. Do you think it gets out of the House? And the bigger question is, if it does get out of the House, will it even get heard in the Senate?
If I had to look at my crystal ball, Dennis, what I would say is that I think we're probably looking at an amendment, maybe in rules or on the floor, that it does get out of the House, but hits a huge brick wall in the Senate. And I think that that's probably where it dies.
What are Democrats saying about this bill? Because I've talked to some Democrats on, off the record about this, and they are concerned. Some of them actually think that you don't want to start limiting legislative immunity right now. What are they saying?
Well, I can reference what the AG has said publicly about it, and she had said she's in favor of it. I understand that there's going to be off-the-record conversations with people expressing concern, and that's why I think Marcus and I have the same crystal ball, where it does hit a brick wall, and unfortunately, I don't think it gets implemented. And That's a bummer, because I think a lot of people want to believe that nobody's above the law, yet we've got a situation in the legislature where you can get out of a speeding ticket, no problem.
And if it did get to the ballot, Marcus, it passes pretty handily, don't you think?
Yeah, that one's a no-brainer.
Yep.
It's going to fly through. And so they know that, and hence the reason it's going to hit a brick wall in the Senate.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the big bounty bill that was issued, that advanced in the Senate this past week. You know, obviously, the governor is going to veto this legislation. She actually said, quote, there's no way in hell that she's going to sign this. So what do you think? Do you expect that Republicans then pivot and send that back to the ballot like they did last year with some of their tougher immigration measures?
It certainly seems to be their playbook. What they're trying to do is put her in a box by having this absurd legislation come up that she then has to veto so they can say she's weak on immigration. It couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, she's allocated $100 million to border security, I think $17 million to the SAFE task force, which I believe stopped some 8 million pills of fentanyl getting in last year. I think equally absurd, we should ask Hoffman if he wants a bounty hunter bill to stop people that are speeding. I mean, I think that would be just as much fun. So at the end of the day, it's a gimmick, right? They're just trying to get headlines out of it. And I think it's incumbent on Democrats to message that and make it clear what the governor has been doing on immigration.
Is this a gimmick, or are they really serious about trying to get this through? And do you think that the Republicans will try to put this on the ballot?
It seems to me like the major energy is behind the show Warren Peterson bill on immigration reform. 1. 2, strategically, I would urge those guys to hold on ballot initiatives until next year when you have a framework of what you want to put on the ballot against this governor. 3, I would say, you know, I hate to break it to everybody here, but we don't have as much money as people think we do. And if you're a state legislator, let me be the first to tell you that surplus you heard about in January is diminished quite a bit. So there is some fiscal ramifications of this bill, and I think that with what the Trump administration is doing on a federal level with Homeland and ICE, I largely think that this problem is going to be solved more on a federal level than spending state resources on furthering that issue.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the politics with the Democratic governor. She's obviously made it clear, and not just signals, she has tried to convince people that she is going to be tougher these next couple of years when it comes to immigration. I mean, again, you can't stress this enough. A week after the results of last year's election, her first appearance was down at the border in Nogales, sending a clear signal that she wants to get serious or tougher on the border. If the Peterson choke bill makes its way to her desk, which I fully expect it will, does the governor sign or veto this piece?
I think we'll have to see when we get there. I mean, I think she's been, you know, tough on immigration over the last several months. I mean, if you think back to when Biden was president, she was at odds with him on some of those things, which, you know, made some Democrats upset, right? So I think she's going to continue to do that, continue to make the investments that she's already done. But it remains to be seen what that final bill is going to look like and what she decides to do.
Yeah, what's the political risk if she does veto a bill like that?
Well, then she's soft on immigration, right? That's what Republicans are going for. And they are doing a great job of pinning her down on making a bunch of things that need to be vetoed, which continues this messaging of I'm the veto queen governor. And what we've talked about for the last month or so is how does she break out of that messaging to be the governor that I want a strong education system that does this. I want a strong healthcare system that's able to do this and take care of kids at home, et cetera, et cetera. But get off that dialogue, that message point of I'm the veto.
And I think that's where the onus is on Democrats. As the Dem consultant at the table, I think Dems could do a better job across the state trying to come to her defense on those particular issues so she doesn't have to be the sole messenger on those points.
And do you see this as part of the whole overall strategy coming from the Republicans to try to send her as much legislation as they can for her to veto?
Absolutely.
I mean, what can she do differently? How can they message it? I mean, it's one thing to say they need to message it differently. What can they be saying?
Well, they need to talk about what her priorities are, what she's done in the past, right, and make it clear that she's not just vetoing things. She's being a bulwark against crazy, harmful legislation, but at the same time, call out the fact that they're playing games. Right? They're trying to do gimmicks. They're trying to get headlines. They're trying to distract, right? So Democrats need to be very overt in that messaging and share that with the broader public because the public doesn't have time for that and they're not paying attention at that level.
All right, let's talk about another bill that's got a lot of attention this past week, and that is how we conduct executions in the state of Arizona. And now some guy wants to do this, wants to be able to do this by firing squad because currently we do the lethal injection method. Where do you see this bill going? I mean, personally, I look at this, I look at the dynamics and and the people down at the legislature. I think this gets through. What does the governor do?
Well, the governor's going to veto that bill, I believe, but it is absent of this discussion. We're having a greater argument or fight over access to those drugs that we use for intravenous death penalty cases. And so this is a solution to get out of that sort of quagmire, if you will, involving that. And so other states have taken it up, other states are debating it, but I would assume that this governor would probably veto that bill. But I do agree, I think it would get through.
Yeah, do you agree with Mark, so the Democratic governor on this? Would you veto or sign this legislation? Again, you know, it's another one of those bills. If she vetoes something like this, I mean, who knows what the message is going to be?
Sure. I think 30,000-foot view, my guess is yes, it's probably a veto. I do think that while it's an important issue and other states are having the debate, if you look at polling, you look at the conversation, you look at the electorate the last several cycles, this particular issue on executions and how they're conducted, it doesn't rise to the same level as other things. So I think politically, if she does veto it, sure, the Republicans might try to use some talking points, but it's not something that sticks long term, especially in a re-election cycle.
All right, going to have to end it there.